Hey there, thanks for downloading Extra Healthy-ish. This is the big sister podcast to the one called Just Healthy-ish. Both podcasts are from Body+Soul, and we hope that they give you that extra oomph in your day. I am your host, Felicity Harley. I came across this study the other day and it was quite horrifying. It suggests 70% of us go through phases of emotionally triggered eating at some point in our lives. And yes, you guessed it, women are more affected than men, especially during COVID-19. So to chat about this complicated relationship between food and emotions, I asked holistic health coach and yoga teacher Stefanie Jung to come on Extra Healthy-ish and help all of us become more mindful, more conscious about the food we fuel ourselves with. Steph, thank you so much for coming on Extra Healthy-ish. Now, one question I ask everyone who comes on this podcast, and you're in Sydney, so perhaps what have you been doing to stay extra healthy-ish in lockdown?
Such a good question. Yeah, for me, it's not necessarily just about what I eat and like what movement I do, but also my mindset and the intention behind all of those choices. So am I coming from a place of, perhaps trying to control because this is the only thing that I feel like I can control in this, I don't even want to use the word, but unprecedented times?
Yeah.
Or am I coming from a place of self-care and self-love right now? So that's always the kind of guiding question that I use when making all of my choices. And then right now, just taking care of my mental health. So doing those tiny little feel-good things here and there that keep me grounded and calm and give me a sense of routine and structure, which at the moment for me means going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, having kind of that regular circadian rhythm, and reading is something that I'm really, really enjoying at the moment. And those things are giving me a bit of a sense of structure and routine.
Have you got any favorite books at the moment that you could recommend?
Oh, yes. Okay. At the moment, I'm reading Health at Every Size by Lindo Bacon. And it's an incredible book that really dissects a lot of the myths that we have around weight loss equals healthy, or being overweight equals disease, or any and all of those kind of myths around weight and the weight stigma. Highly recommend that book.
Oh, I like it. Okay. Now we are talking a bit, we're talking about food, not weight loss per se, but let's talk about emotions and food. Can you talk me through how these two, they're so intertwined, aren't they? Talk us through the relationship between food and emotions.
This is a big one, isn't it? We eat the way we eat because we're afraid to feel the way we feel.
In a nutshell.
So, yeah, pretty much. Food for so many of us is a way to distract, suppress, numb. I know definitely for myself that was my experience, that I was using food to really push down the emotions that were bubbling beneath the surface because I didn't know how else to deal with them. And so learning how to deal with your emotions in ways other than food is a really, really important aspect of healing your relationship with food. Learning that it's okay to feel all your feelings, knowing that, whether it's good or bad, just let's feel it all. And also perhaps looking at, okay, what other more sustainable long-term tools do I have at my disposal to deal with emotions?
So how do we recognize if, say, our food choices and what we eat is driven by, emotional, let's call them cravings rather than physical ones? How can we get more in touch with, I'm actually hungry, I need to eat, rather than, oh, I'm bored, I'll just go to the cupboard again?
Totally. So a good kind of test for this is if you find yourself having a craving and you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm physically hungry or if it's emotional hunger. Take the thing that you're craving, put it in a bowl or on a plate, like not directly out of the packaging, sit down, remove all distractions, no phone, no TV, no nothing, and sit there with just the food and eat that food. And if that feels good, then it's probably because you're physically hungry. If you're sitting there thinking this sucks and you have that kind of underlying
what am I doing?
then that's probably a sign that you aren't physically hungry, but you were just emotionally wanting to eat and numb and distract yourself. And now that you've taken away those other means of distraction, it kind of feels almost futile, like, what am I doing?
And I also think so much of it is habit too, isn't it? I mean, I know personally, especially working from home, I get to about 10:30 and I think, oh, I need a coffee, and I'm really into pretzels at the moment. Oh, I need some pretzels. I don't need pretzels. I'm not hungry. It's funny how that habit kind of creeps in as well as, emotionally being drawn to something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the big question to ask yourself in those moments is, okay, if I don't need food right now, what else is it that I could possibly be needing right now? And then diving a little bit deeper what those alternatives could be.
Yeah, good advice. Now, what's the I've always wondered this. What's the difference between, say, binge eating or overeating? So emotionally, I mean, obviously, when we're driven by emotional cravings, we have the desire to, whether it's binge eat or overeat, we just seem to eat more a lot of the time. So what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, I love this question. And binge eating is the thing that I struggled with for years. So would love to go into detail on this one. So binge eating to me is qualitative. It's not necessarily about how much you eat, but it's the quality behind how you eat. So it's like the way I think about it is it's like a plunge into oblivion. It's you purposely knocking yourself out because whatever is going on is too uncomfortable to sit with or deal with. So it's very, very different to overeating in that regard, because overeating could simply be because you were distracted or you're just not in tune with your hunger and fullness levels, or because what you were eating was just so tasty and you wanted to have more of it. A binge is very much an out of body, almost like animalistic feeling where you feel like you lose all control. And that is the only thing that you can do and focus on. And you're almost in like a trance-like state. At least that's how I perceived it. So yeah, very much qualitative rather than quantitative.
Actually, let's go into that. Tell us a bit about your, past. You've struggled with, some eating disorders, and tell us about that point where you were in a trance and your kind of journey during this time.
Yeah. So the way I actually slipped into all of this was with a really innocent first diet. And I say the word innocent lightly because it's obviously not. But yeah, I actually started dieting when I was about 17 and went through a year or so where I became increasingly more restrictive and was under eating, over exercising. I lost my period for many months. And was really leaning more towards the anorexic side of things. But then something switched. And to be honest, I don't even remember when, how, and what really happened. But suddenly I found myself binge eating. And the more I was binge eating, the more I thought, oh, I lack willpower, I lack discipline, I lack control, and I need to rein it in even more. I need to restrict even more. And then I found myself in that chronic binge restrict cycle. And obviously now in hindsight, I can understand what happened and understand the science behind it, that after month and month of physically restricting, my body had just said, enough is enough. And it almost forced me to binge as a survival mechanism, right? It was my body's way of telling me, hey, you need to eat. But yeah, that set off years of being in that binge restrict cycle. And then with time, you add on the emotional layer of it, and then it becomes a habit. And then it just becomes a really complex, convoluted beast that took, for me, multiple years to kind of work through.
We'll be back after this. And so what in the end pulled you out of it?
So for me, there was a couple of things that happened. It was actually moving in with my partner where I realized, wow, I'm living a double life. Like there was so much of me that I was hiding from him, and I was lying to him about my food behaviors and my exercise routine. And that really hit me. Like, I do not want to keep going like this. I'm really living a double life here. And I really had that rock bottom moment, which I still remember to this day. It was the 12th of March, 2012. And the reason why I remember that date is because the next day I went and bought a journal, and I started journaling as a way to deal with my feelings and my emotions. And you know what I was saying before about a binge being kind of that plunge into oblivion where you're trying to suppress your emotions. The journaling for me became that way of processing what I was feeling. And then I did start working with a psychologist and therapist, although that actually didn't resonate with me. And luckily, I found someone, actually a health coach who herself had struggled with disordered eating. And that for me was the catalyst for my healing journey, because I finally found someone who was able to relate to my story. They had walked in my shoes before, and they could provide that safe space for me. And that really was such a powerful experience. And that's actually why I now do the work that I do, working as a coach, because I firsthand experienced that power of working with someone who just gets it.
Actually, that is really great advice, isn't it? Because if you are struggling with eating, often, we go to we try a psychologist first, which is absolutely where we should go. But often it's about finding what works for you, and one thing might not work, something else might work. And then, congratulations on your healing journey and being healed, and then sharing your advice with other people. So how did you, and how can we become more mindful of the food we put in our body?
Yeah. I think step one is becoming more connected to your body's wisdom, the hunger, the fullness cues. So there's a word for that, that's interoceptive awareness. And that's being able to pinpoint and feel and label what's happening internally. So, can you sit here and feel your heartbeat? Yes, you can. That's interoceptive awareness. And can you build that interoceptive awareness muscle when it comes to hunger and fullness? Because if you've got that connection to your body, then you're a lot less likely to, for example, notoriously overeat and, as a result, eat more mindfully. But I do think that in order to do that, you have to first, or simultaneously rather, work through that mental restriction piece. Because unless you tackle that, you're never gonna want to eat mindfully, because you're always driven by this forbidden fruit effect to eat something that you've told yourself not to eat, or this what the heck, oh, I already overate, now I might as well keep going because I've just botched my diet. Like, as long as you've got those belief systems in place, it's always going to be really difficult to eat mindfully. So you need to kind of do those two things together, working through the mental restriction, giving yourself that unconditional permission to eat anything and everything, while simultaneously working to deepen that connection to your hunger and fullness cues.
So what about, studies show that up to 70% of us actually will go through phases of being emotionally triggered. We'll do, some sort of eating at some point, emotionally triggered eating at some point. What's your advice? What have you done and what do you do for pushing past these cravings when you feel like, those emotions do come into play and they're speaking to you and they're overbearing and you just can't stop? What should we do here?
Yeah, I think the most important thing here is to firstly acknowledge that emotional eating in and of itself isn't a bad thing. Like, it's not a sin. It's what we make of it. And the difference between someone who occasionally overeats and then that's it, and someone who really struggles with their relationship with food and their body, is that those people who just emotionally eat and move on, they just forgive themselves. It's not a big deal. There's no morality, no guilt and shame attached to it. So that, I think, is the first thing to say. The other thing is, the way that I think about this is, we all carry around a self-care toolkit, and it's at our disposal wherever we go. Now, like I mentioned, food deserves a place in that. Like, there's a time and a place for emotional eating. It should be in there. But the question is, do you also have other tools at your disposal? And if the answer is no, not really, then it becomes a matter of cultivating that toolkit and adding in some other alternative tools to deal with, the stuff that life throws at you. Now, the last thing I want to mention about this is, if you're kind of at that breaking point of, I'm so angry or so sad or so frustrated, and I really just want to eat this thing, there's something to be said about just surrendering and allowing it. Because the more you fight it, the more probably the more difficult it's going to get for you to not eat that thing. And you build up more and more resistance, and then you also build up more guilt and more frustration as you eat it. So actually, by allowing yourself to eat that thing, you give yourself the chance to maybe halfway through realize, oh, you know what, this isn't actually doing anything for me. This isn't fixing my problem. But if you don't allow yourself to have it, that's probably not going to happen. So can you surrender to it in that moment and just allow it to happen? And, it might not happen immediately, but with time, the more you do that, it actually then gives you the ability to find other alternative mechanisms to deal with emotions.
I loved when you said having that self-care toolkit. What are some things perhaps you have in yours, or that, you can share to help us when we do get in this cycle? I've got to eat. Okay, let's just draw on this in my toolkit. What are some of those tools?
Yeah. I kind of differentiate between like maintenance self-care things that I can, like the big things, yoga and meditation and movement. But obviously, sometimes you're just stuck in a situation. Let's say you're at work and you just really want to go eat something, but you obviously don't have an hour time to go do a workout or get into nature. So the question is, okay, what do I do in moments like that? And that can be as simple as doing a really, really simple breath work, just getting up from your desk, changing your scenery for just a couple of minutes, maybe sitting on the couch, taking a couple of deep belly breaths, connecting with your body and asking that question, if I don't need food right now, what else would I need? And maybe that's as simple as a glass of water, or just a 5-minute walk around the block instead of an hour of a workout. There are small ways that you can do that. I call them micro moments of self-care.
Oh, I like that.
So finding those micro moments that you can implement. And, oftentimes that might just be changing your mindset around when you're already doing something that's part of your day. So let's say while you're brushing your teeth, instead of thinking about the to-do list that's ahead and worrying about everything that you got to get done that day, can you see that toothbrushing experience as like a mini meditation, for example, an example like that. So there's many, many ways that we can incorporate those micro moments of self-care to help us get through those moments when we don't have an hour time to do the big things.
Steph, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on Extra Healthy-ish, and for coming to chat to us.
Thank you so much for having me, Felicity.
If this chat has raised any issues with you or anyone you know who needs support for eating disorders or body image issues, please see the Butterfly Foundation at butterfly.org.au. It is a fabulous service offering advice and help via online, phone or web chat. If you want more from us at Body & Soul on healthy eating and nutrition, remember Extra Healthy-ish publishes a new episode every morning, Monday to Thursday, or head online to bodyandsoul.com.au. You can also join the conversation via Body & Soul on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks again for tuning into this chat with Steph. If you have a moment, we'd be so grateful if you could jump on and rate, review and subscribe to this podcast. And until tomorrow, stay extra healthy-ish.